Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, where we explore all aspects of ending relationships, separation, and parenting apart. If your marriage or partnership has ended, or you have friends and family who are separating, this podcast is for you. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor, divorce specialist, and co-founder of Amicable, the online legal service for separating couples. In each episode, we look at relationships and separation from different angles, including the emotional, legal, and social. I'm joined by experts and special guests who share their own unique stories, experience, and tips with the goal of helping people end relationships in a kinder and better way. In this episode, I was joined by comedian Bobby Mair to talk about his marriage and divorce from fellow comedian Harriet Kemlsey. Bobby is a Canadian stand-up comedian based in London. He starred in his own sitcom with his ex-wife on Vice and Comedy Central called Bobby and Harriet Get Married. He has appeared multiple times on Comedy Central's Roast Battle, including appearing in a battle with Harriet that got millions of hits online. His other credits include 8 out of 10 Cats for Channel 4 and Never Mind the Buzzcocks, BBC 2. He's opened for Doug Stanhope, Bill Burr and Bill Mair and appeared 3 times at Just for Laughs in Montreal. This episode is focused on Bobby's marriage, separation and divorce. We talked about how he and Harriet managed to achieve an amicable separation by avoiding creating separate sides through solicitors and by putting their child front and centre and being pragmatic about living arrangements. Bobby also talked about their supportive social circle and gives his tips on how to separate amicably. If you loved this episode, then please subscribe and rate us on your preferred listening platform. Welcome, Bobby.
Hello, Kate.
It's lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining us. I'm really interested to hear your story of the relationship and the breakdown of the relationship today.
It's such a, I have to say, this is the bleakest email I've ever got. When you get an email, like, do you want to be on the divorce? No, I don't want to be on the divorce podcast.
Because this is an unusual situation where you're both coming on. So Harriet's going to join us subsequently. So we'll hear the two sides.
Well, I want to get in her first. Yeah. Set the record straight. Yes. Let her know.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about divorce and separation. But before we do, I'm interested, just for people who obviously haven't seen the TV show, have been cut off from the internet in some weird way, but just tell us a little bit about how you met Harriet to start with. What was your relationship like?
Well, it's hard to sum up a 12-year relationship in a podcast, but we met twice at gigs. We're both comedians. And then the third time we met was at a house party, but I didn't remember the first 2 times. So I didn't have a reference that I had met her, but she had met me. And I don't know, there was like a romantic spark between us and we kind of started seeing each other. Yeah.
And then when did the relationship, I suppose, become a feature of your sort of online comedy life, then your internet life, and eventually a TV series? How did you go from, like a fairly conventional boy meets girl, gets hooked up at a party to being the subject of a TV show?
Well, we had a friend who was a TV producer, and we had done a podcast with me, Harriet, and our friend Tim Renko, who's a fellow comedian. And our friend named Stu Richards. Stu had watched us on the podcast and thought that the way we fought and the way we interacted was quite funny and that our dynamic was quite funny. And so he had this idea to do a mockumentary about us planning our wedding where we get married in the mockumentary and it's filmed at our actual wedding. And usually when someone pitches you a TV show, you go, yeah, that sounds great. And then you never hear about it again. Like most TV shows that are thought of don't happen. So we filmed a 3-minute teaser, which is just like kind of not even an episode, just like a little scene in our flat. We lived in Crystal Palace at the time. We were only in that place for like 6 months. It was weird that it was there, Stu cut it together and he sent it to a few people. And I believe he sent it to a few production companies and they didn't really do much with it or didn't have any luck. And then he went to Vice with this tape. And this was like 8 weeks before our wedding. And they watched the tape and then they brought us in for a meeting. And then they were like, yeah, we want to make it. And we were like, what? Okay. But then we hadn't written it because it's a mockumentary, but you write episodes, which usually for a normal sitcom takes a year. So then we just wrote it in 2 weeks, and then we filmed it in 6 weeks, and we filmed at our wedding. It was I was in the midst of a complete mental breakdown at the time, which added another, I would say, layer of stress to the whole process.
Imagine. Another dimension, I imagine. Yeah. Well, what was going on for you at that time then? What was happening?
Well, I think what was happening. So to give a bit, I guess it is the divorce, but context for me and Harriet's relationship, we had like a ton of fun together, but like I had some definitely undiagnosed mental illness that was just really starting to rear its head. Even to say mental illness, I don't know. It was just like I had found my biological mother because I'm adopted, and I was really excited about meeting her, but I hadn't kind of built up the courage to try to meet her. And then she died, and that kind of broke my brain. And I started just having very erratic moods and being very unpleasant to be around for anyone who was around me. And couldn't have been nice to be Harriet for sure at the time. And while that's happening, while my kind of mental health is just deteriorating, we're filming this show. And I could still keep it together for the work, but then off camera, I was just insufferable.
Right. And you're filming a show about getting married, and you are actually getting married. So you've got the sort of fake layer of this is a TV show that you've written. You've got your real life of getting married. And then on top of that, you've got this tragic loss of your mother at the point at which you were imagining this kind of big reunion.
Yes, and Harriet, for some reason, was just wanted to. I mean, there's so many great things about our relationship. Like, it was very passionate and very like we have the same interests in a lot of ways. But like, I would have left me then. I was so no fun. I was angry. I went from angry to sad to angry to sad to fine to like it was just like awful to be around me.
Well, I was sort of wondering whether or not whether the filming of the marriage on top of everything else that was going on, do you think that set you on a certain course for the marriage? Do you think that impacted, or was it just a situational thing?
If you have a marriage that is interesting enough to be filmed, even though we're playing characters of ourselves, we're playing, there was a truth to the dynamic. There's probably some problems, But no, it was a really stressful time in our lives because when we were filming for like 12 hours a day. And then when we weren't filming, I didn't do that much wedding planning. I don't know how to.
You didn't have the binder then.
People want. Well, I don't know what people want at a wedding. I'm like, even if they said, Bobby, you plan the wedding, we're bored of planning the wedding, I wouldn't have done a good job planning a wedding. I don't know how to plan a party. So it was a very stressful time for sure. But yeah, we got married.
So after you got married then, tell us what happened. So you got married, you careers take off, you're successful, you're happy. How do you get to the point where you decide that the relationship, has run its course? Tell us the journey to get to that separation point then.
It's so hard to sum that up. Like, I understand how people would want some clear linear narrative of what was the definitive, but like, we just kind of changed.
And I think that's what people are interested in, isn't it? Because you're right. If there's been an affair or something like that, or an event, then it's easy to do the cause and effect. And that makes us feel better because we can say, well, that's not going to happen to me, or I'm not like that. But I suppose what makes people, what's interesting is that this worry that this can happen to any relationship. And so just trying to work through, well, what happened in this case? Because I think if you can understand that relationships, they're made and they break all of the time, and it is normal for relationships to move on and for people to grow apart or do different things, then we stop stigmatizing the idea that this is some big failure or disaster, but it's just a normal part of life. We come together, we make a connection, that connection may or may not last, but we can then move on and make other connections. And I think just normalizing the idea that as we live longer, we will have multiple relationships, and it's normal to be able to transition from one to another in an adult way. That's where my interest lies, certainly. So how did you come to that journey?
Yeah, and I get what you're asking, and it's like, I mean, definitely, like, Harriet was a great wife and a great partner, and but I came into this relationship with a lot of my own issues, and I feel like she put in a shift. She put in how many years? 12 years, I think. So 12 years of just me always having kind of like a problem, and I'm great at many things. I just don't think I was like a great husband. But I also don't feel I mean, I feel bad in some ways about that, but, like, that's okay. I don't know. It's
Well,
like,
I think you can feel sad rather than bad, can't you? You can feel sad that the marriage didn't work, or that that people were hurt.
yeah, but I do feel bad. Like, bad as in guilt. You feel guilty because you're just like, you feel guilty because you're like, I wish I was better at this. But also, it's very hard to separate where your problems are, where the other person's problems are, and where it's just who you are. And that's very difficult, especially as you go from your 20s to your 30s, because in your 20s, you're like, oh, I need to fix this about myself. I need to work on myself. I need to do this about myself. And you do all these years of work on yourself. And then eventually you're like, maybe this is just who I am. And where the who you are and the difference between who you are and what you think you need to work on is hard to find. And I think maybe that's where a lot of couples struggle, because they're always doing this work. They're working on themselves. And then at some point it's like, or you just try to have to like radically accept the other person for who they are, which I don't think necessarily a lot of people are good at.
No, and maybe not when you're younger and you still have that idealized, optimistic view that you're going to meet someone that you just instantly click with, and that it will feel easy to do things with. So I guess that's part of it, isn't it? The older you get, the more acceptant you become of yourself, and therefore the more acceptant you are at understanding that it's not all good. To have a good relationship, it means that sometimes it's really tough and you have to battle through really uncomfortable things, make compromises you really don't want to make, and that kind of stuff.
I also think there's so much pressure or there's an idealized vision of a marriage in the Western world that there's going to be one other person that satisfies every one of
Everything.
your
Yeah.
needs.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just so like insane. Like, I know a guy who's in an arranged marriage, and I'm not like advocating for arranged marriages, but he's been married for a long time. And I remember asking him about, like, oh, did you tell your wife about the gig we were just doing? And he was just like, no, we don't talk about that kind of stuff. And like, they talked about their household and their children, and it was very perfunctory. And like, yeah, that's one side of the coin. But also, I think that makes a lot more sense than two people who are like, you're going to be my entire emotional support. You're also going to be the person I spend all of my time with. And you're also going to be my financial partner and co-parent. And it's like, that is a lot.
Yeah. And I've also got to find you
That,
sexy and surprising at least twice a week. Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I also have to want to have sex with you somehow through all of the various business strands we've started, where I'm your therapist, financial advisor, workout partner, business partner, like, it's just like a lot.
Yeah, and please don't forget to put the bins out on a Tuesday.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you find most surprising then about the separation journey? Because you come to a decision, it's not working. So what did you find most challenging to navigate at that point once you decided that the relationship was over?
Well, to both of our credit, I would say we managed to keep it very pleasant. And I don't know if this is, this is before we started recording. I'm in the house I used to live in right now. I'm at the house with my dog, and I'm going to pick up my daughter. And so we've come to the other side of it well. But at first it was very, there's like that feeling of mistrust. And we have a daughter who's 2, and we both love her so much. And there's this feeling of mistrust, possible mistrust with childcare, and then the possible mistrust with finances, and how are you going to separate the measly assets you have. But the reality is, at the time, all of our money was kind of locked into our house. So I just decided it would be best. I just rented a room very nearby. I stayed with a friend for a while, then rented a room very nearby. And then we just co-parent at the house. And I still put my daughter to bed a few nights a week. I'm there in the morning, a few mornings a week when she wakes up. I see her almost every day. And if I don't see her, it's because I'm at work. So that's what we decided to do. So
So we call that like birds nesting here. So we use that term birds nesting. So you keep a family home and you do your parenting time in the home, and then when you're not doing the parenting time, you effectively move out. Does Harriet move out as well, or does Harriet is that how? So Harriet's got a permanent base at home, and then you go and do your parenting at the
yes.
family home.
But the problem with Harriet moving out would be like Harriet's a very organized person and she likes her routine.
Right. So the color
And
coded bookcase is hers then.
yes, if you look behind me, the color, that's her. So I would think she would find that too difficult. And so based on the fact that I was probably the one who caused the most problems in the marriage, being a drug addict, alcoholic, then a very moody boy for years, I was like, yeah, I'll move out. I'll live nearby. And that was hard, definitely, just from a logistical point of view, because I'm a comedian. I'm also a writer, so I'll be doing writing work in the day, stand up at night, and then in between that, taking my daughter, to ballet or swimming, or we used to go to baby football, but that was on a Saturday morning and it was really too early, so we stopped.
What, too early for your
But
daughter?
no, too early for me.
Yeah.
But it was just horrible. It was a horrible way to start a Saturday. I moved out, and I was still seeing my daughter a lot. I wasn't necessarily sleeping a lot because just with the way our schedules were, and we were both really busy with work, and we were both just running around all the time. And maybe this is similar to most parents' days. I don't know how most people live, but it was just a lot of days where I'd wake up at 7:30 in the morning, leave the place I was staying, and get back at 1 a.m. And it would just be like a lot of 16, 17, 18-hour days of just go, 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 go. And that was very physically exhausting. And it definitely added a pressure. And also our expenses definitely went up when you're now paying to live somewhere else. So just had to try to make more money. And then that adds a stress.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's you've got the extra. You're trying to parent and you're parenting at separate times. So you're trying to spread yourself really thin, aren't you, to cover the entire day for your daughter. You're then trying to earn more money because everything is more expensive because you've got to split one home into two homes. And it just must feel like a bit of a treadmill. And I think you probably are articulating what lots of parents feel at the beginning, especially when you've got small kids. It's a real treadmill, isn't it? Trying to keep everything going, juggling everything with this constant pressure of we need to earn, we need to earn, we need to earn.
Also, just a cost of living crisis. So every month, everything just got more expensive, and our mortgage was renegotiated, and that went up a lot. Oh, well, that was, yeah, but the mortgage went up also. So, and there were also just that feeling of those small feelings of mistrust and worry. So we decided we didn't do a trial separation. It was Harriet's idea, and then I quickly was on board for the idea.
So Harriet was the instigator of the split then, was she? Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
So Harriet called it, you agreed, essentially.
I agreed, and instantly and
was there any relief in that though, Bobby? So did you get a sense of relief at some point that actually you've been struggling?
I've read that men often feel a sense of relief, I think, immediately, and then later feel their sadness, is what I read somewhere. I think they realize what they've lost later. Because at first it's like, oh, I could do whatever I want. But then maybe a while later, you're like, oh, this is quite lonely, doing whatever you want, actually. So definitely there's a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness. There's a lot of sadness. But between us, in terms of navigating the actual divorce, there was no trial separation. We just decided this is what we're doing, what we were doing, and we decided we just didn't get any lawyers involved. There was no lawyer. We just negotiated amongst ourselves an amount of money, and Harriet bought me out of the house. And next week I'll have my own flat nearby, and just down the road, and that'll be great. And so, but that was difficult, but we managed to keep it cordial. And also with the amount of money that it's not like we're millionaires. So it's like if we either of us get a lawyer involved, any amount of money we're talking about is just going to be given to a lawyer. Like there's no benefit financially to winning. Like it's like, oh, you think it should be this number, I think it should be this number. Well, why don't we just go give the difference between those two numbers to another person? Like why? And also create mistrust and anger between you. So having a daughter has been great for mine and Harriet's relationship because it made us see each other every day for the last year, talk to each other every day for the last year. And in another life, I think, you would never want to see that person
No,
again.
you'd
But
go and
now
crawl under a stone somewhere, wouldn't you? And lick your wounds and just be able to put them out of your mind. But you're right. If you've got a kid, you are connected forever.
Yeah, and I think we've now transitioned into something not much, just something nice. And our marriage, there were so many great parts of it. Like Harry's an incredible person, and the parts that work great for a long time, and then the parts that didn't work. But now those parts are out, and it's just now that we're friends, it's just kind of the parts that are good, I think.
So you found a new meaning in the relationship then. You found a new way of relating.
Definitely.
And
And I would really encourage people to try to do that. But I mean, often one party isn't willing. You have to have two people willing to go through that chemical withdrawal of having a physical relationship, and just the sadness of like the life you've planned out together kind of ending, and the future children you planned on having not being born, and all of that grief and sadness and feelings of I just felt like definitely like I have failed at this. I did not succeed at this. I was not equipped to do this. And I mean, I wasn't equipped. No one really tells you how to do it. You just fumble your way through in the dark, and then some people work it out and some people don't. But yeah, the fact that we didn't get any lawyers involved, and we just worked everything out, and we don't have any kind of definitive child care. You see them, then I see you. That we just kind of, because our schedules are so erratic. Sometimes I'm here twice a day at my old house, which is a very nice house. That, I mean, to be fair, Harriet made it great. I doubt my new place will look this good. I'll need a lot of friends to help me.
Oh, she might help
try
you.
to match.
Yeah.
She will. She's already promised. Yeah, of course she will. So yeah.
Do you think that the comedy and the fact that you're comedians allows you to see the relationship in a different way? Or is that just you could be an accountant and it would be the same? But do you think comedy gives you something?
We have a very strong, supportive friend group. I'm very close with Harriet's family, I think. I think they, when I see them, it's nice. Who knows but I think I am. And I think we just didn't want to lose that. And also our number one priority is our daughter. And I don't know, I haven't read that many books about it, but I did some Googling, and I do know that what fucks kids up is not a divorce necessarily. It's their parents hating each other. And so I kind of just made it my goal to not let that happen.
Yeah, it is exactly that. It's not seeing a parent or parental conflict that really, as you say, screws with a child. If you can be good co-parents, your kids have the same potential outcomes in education, in social, in mental health, in psychological health. They have the same possibility to thrive that kids with parents who haven't separated. So it's exactly that, trying to create that amicable framework for being good co-parents.
Yeah, and I guess there's the only kind of underlying worry I have is like having a good model for a romantic relationship. But I assume at some point, me and Harriet, one of us will get a spouse, and then they'll have a model.
Yeah, exactly.
Or my daughter
yeah.
will have a model, and that's kind of it. And
But that's important as well, because what you don't want to model to them is this. We have still this notion of staying together for the kids, where you're role modeling effectively an unfulfilling and sad relationship. And you would never want to say to your kid, this is what you need to aspire for, this awful, dreary relationship that me and your mum or me and your dad have, where we barely speak to each other. We're really hostile. Everything's done with horrible looks and, silences and doors slamming. You would never want that for your kids. So role modeling that to them, but staying together because somehow you feel that's better. It's such a non-concept. So it's great to hear you say the same thing and to acknowledge that actually what you want to be is a good role model in terms of relationships. And I think there's no better role model than saying, actually, being on my own and working on myself at the moment is what I need to do. And that's what's going to make me happy. And if in the future that means I'll meet somebody and have a new relationship, then great, I'll be in a good place to do that. But just be together for the sake of the kids just feels very wrong.
Yeah, and in terms of I feel like I found it hard to talk about what was difficult, but what was difficult was the worry that the other was going to somehow leave. I think the worry for Harriet was that I wasn't going to support my daughter financially. Not that I gave any signs of that, but you're just like, well, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, it's your worst fear, isn't it? Yeah.
And for me, it's that I'm not going to get access to my child. And then there's our money being in the house. And you're like, well, am I going to get the amount of money that I want? Like that, there's that. Whenever you're talking in the tone of voice, it's like, and it's like, ugh. It's so boring. So we definitely had moments like that, but we were able to work through them just by kind of committing to the idea that we were going to be friends and we were going to make it work. And we were going to see each other every day, so we might as well get along.
Yeah. So you almost had this goal that sort of was bigger than the separation or anything. It was just about, we have to make this a good relationship where we can communicate. We have a child. We need to make the best of this. I mean, you've said before, go on, sorry.
I would say I too quickly transitioned into it. While Harriet was grieving the relationship in a very normal way, I was just like happy, clappy, fun guy being like, so we're friends now. And I think that was uncomfortable for her, definitely. And she kind of felt like I didn't care about the relationship. But one thing I'm quite good at is compartmentalizing my feelings and just being like, well, this is what I'm doing now. I've dealt with that. And there's a truth to that. I'm just good at kind of moving on. So I'm sad. It's only a sad transition. There's things I miss, but I also am very happy about the life we have now. And I'm excited for us both to have more happy or just happy lives and still be a part of each other's life. It's just different.
I think you've said in the past that you've had more therapists than girlfriends. Do you think that the therapy you've
Did
had...
I say that somewhere?
Yes. Do you think the therapy that you've had has helped you navigate this transition?
Yeah, I had a really good therapist actually when my brain broke, when I had a complete mental breakdown when I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. I had this therapist who did dialectical behavioral therapy, which I feel like, listen, if you're a woman with a moody husband listening to this podcast, Google borderline personality disorder. Underdiagnosed. A lot of us are in prison, but so I would say, yeah. So the therapist I had was great, and he kind of really taught me how to regulate my emotions, but still not enough to necessarily be in a marriage. But for the rest of my life, wonderful. I just don't. I'm not great at like living with someone, but I'm good at I'm not great at everything else, but I'm good enough at every other part of my life, I think. So yeah, that therapist was great. His name was Daryl. I recommend him. Daryl Christie. Google him. Shout out to my therapist. He's quite expensive and somewhat of a rude man, but he's very good.
But if you listen to, the way you've navigated the separation and where you are now in terms of making that transition from one life to another life, I think he deserves a shout out because it sounds like you've navigated that really very well.
Harriet's also had her own, it's, but for me, if I was talking about myself, I just was like, oh, well, I'm always somebody who's kind of been good at achieving a goal. And I'm like, well, I want to just be Harriet's friend and I want to make this work. So I kind of just put my whole energy into that. And there would be days where I'd come to the house and for 2 or 3 days, she'd be very cold with me. And I could see that she was emotionally trying to distance herself from me and not feel like my partner. And not that I always succeeded at all. Sometimes I maybe would react and there'd be a bit of an argument. But in general, I would, and maybe I would overreact, and maybe I would not to make it seem like Harriet's like I've lots of, maybe I would overreact and cause a fight. But there'd be times when I'd come here and I could tell she was cold with me, and I tried very hard and sometimes succeeded not to take it personally. I realized it's literally just like a lot of it is just chemical. Like she's trying to chemically kind of separate from me. Like there's some, like it's like heroin withdrawal. It's literally like, it feels like heroin withdrawal. So it's like, okay, so it's like just, I'm just going to, and I did not always succeed, but I tried to stay quite neutral to it and be all right.
I think that's one of the things, isn't it? It's that sense of kind of feeling your way through the separation and not over attributing stuff that people are feeling in their own individual bubble to something that you are doing or saying. I think sometimes in a divorce and separation, we get hypersensitive to this idea that everything somebody says is about us. And actually, a lot of the upset, the anger in the case you're talking about, the sort of wanting to cut yourself off and the coldness, it's not about you. It's about Harriet. It's about the other individual. It's about the person. And sometimes I think in divorce and separation, we take it as an attack where it's not meant as an attack, and we over attribute stuff where there is no attribution to be made. And I think that can really escalate conflict.
Well, yeah, it's like quitting smoking and then being really angry at the cigarettes and like, it's just like, well, yeah, it's just a physical withdrawal.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's more than that. But that's me. I'm a very detached. I can be very detached. That's a very detached point of view. My other point of view is, well, yes, it's sad because our relationship is ending, but I have taken the point of view of just trying to move on to whatever our new life is. And maybe I'm ignoring some feelings, but I could deal with those feelings. I don't know, when I'm 70, whatever. I have lots of time to
Storing
feel
it up.
feelings. There's lots of time. This idea that you need to feel all your feelings. I don't know if you do. Like, I don't. You can just fake it. Just be pleasant with each other.
Well, I think when you're in the thick of trying to sort out a lot of the kind of crap that comes with a separation, so just dealing with the mundanity of how you're splitting things and what you're doing, I think there is a great idea that you can actually box some of the feelings up for that time, because you're trying to negotiate, you're doing a business deal effectively. So being emotional at that time can really get in the way and can cloud things. But I do think that you have to deal with the feelings at some point. I don't think you can store them up indefinitely. And I wonder whether 70 is a bit of a missed opportunity.
What does deal with the feelings even mean? You just cry for a while and talk to your friend, and then you go on a vacation and reinvent yourself. I don't know. Yes, all of those things. But I am a detached man who has had a lot of tragedy in his life. So giving Harriet the gift of divorcing her, giving Harriet that gift that she no longer has to live with me. The gift, that she gave me, the gift she gave herself, actually, give her credit. The gift she gave herself of not having to live with me.
The gift she chose. Yeah, I like that.
The gift she chose. I'll give her ownership over her decision. The gift she rightfully chose. I would say I'm not going to waste time being annoyed about it or being bitter. You only have one life.
Yeah, you get one life. Yeah,
and
absolutely. Yeah.
There's nothing more sad than a man in his early 40s angrily complaining about his ex-wife. There is nothing more I knew I did not want to be. I want to be someone where if I meet them, they don't know I'm divorced because it's not the first thing I tell them. And I don't know if I've always succeeded with that I probably haven't always succeeded with that at all. I'm sure there's people, someone I know is listening to this, they're like, yeah, you have not succeeded. But that is the goal.
I think in that sentence, you can change the age and the gender to practically anything. I don't think anyone ever wants to be a person.
But for me, I'm a man,
exactly.
so
You're
I
a
can
man
talk
in your
about
50s, 40s, sorry. But yeah, exactly. I think that really resonates, because that's the goal, isn't it? Ultimately, what we need to get to as a society is to be able to transition from relationships without feeling like a failure, without it being a punitive process, and without us having to spend years of our lives soul searching about why the relationship broke down. I think we need to get better at transitioning between relationships and accept that we have lots of relationships in our lives. Some last a long time, some last a short time. But the goal is to move on with love and with happiness in our hearts. And I have to say, you sound like you've done a pretty good job of that. So just conscious of time, what would be, if there's people listening and you wanted to like leave them with one sort of,
I hope someone's
yeah,
listening.
I hope
That would be
someone's
really
listening
sad
as
to
well.
figure out. No
Something's
one's ever listened.
going very wrong. What would be your final advice or tips for people listening when they're in the thick of this? Perhaps they don't feel quite as positive as you do on the other side. What would you say to them?
Just try to own your own behavior. Don't try very hard for I statements, and try to own what you've done and not wait for the other person. That's all you can do, even if it's all their fault. All you can do is own your own mistakes and either get away from that person. Because I also realize I'm talking about a divorce where two people are sane and want the best for each other. That's probably not true for a lot of people. So that's the kind of, I'm talking about a very specific situation, but if you're in that kind of situation, own your own behavior.
Definitely. Well, I think it's fantastic advice to end on. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, Bobby.
Thank you, Kate Daly.
Where can people find out more about you and what you're up to these days?
Follow me on Instagram, Bobby Mair. That is my name. That would probably be the best way.
And it's straight Bobby Mair on Insta. Yeah.
Bobby Mair Comedian on Instagram.
Okay. Brilliant. All right. Well, we'll put your handles in the show notes too, so people can follow you and find out more about what you're up to. For separation and co-parenting support, please visit amicable.co.uk, where you can explore our free resources or book a free advice consultation. Thank you, everybody, for listening.